wider life, in fact, in and around Portsmouth, Southampton. I'm particularly concerned, have been over the years, in my parliamentary activity with green and environmental issues. I've spent a great deal of time pursuing those in Parliament, but that doesn't mean I'm any less concerned or aware about many other issues. My private member's bill, since we were asked to do this at the beginning of the session, is perhaps a bit of an odd one. Private members' bills in Parliament, you've got to put them in such a way that they do not involve financial expenditure. And you've got to try and put them in so they've got a chance of succeeding, among other things. What I'd like to do is put a private members' bill in which would require ports across the country to put in electrical connections to ships coming into the port to reduce their pollution when they're in ports and make sure that they are good neighbours to the airports where they go to. That would particularly benefit Southampton, of course, but would be something across the country.
Paul, Conservative.
Well, firstly, can I thank you, Dan, for rearranging this hustings this evening. It's great to see so many people here, especially after the terrible events last week. I'm Paul Holmes, I'm a Conservative candidate. I absolutely love this city and I want to see it improve. I have a history as a city councillor here in the city, and I ran the local schools for 2 years, and I came here into the city as a student. And I'm standing to be your voice in Westminster, not Westminster's voice in Southampton. And the private members' bill that I would introduce would be a bill to make it a specific crime, a specific offence, criminal offence, if a member of a staff in the NHS are attacked. There is currently a law that police officers are protected by a specific law if they are attacked by the public. And I think that our NHS staff in this city perform a fantastic service and they should be protected. Last year, we had 70,000 attacks on NHS staff. We have a wonderful hospital, and I think that we need to make sure that those staff are protected and that if they are attacked, convictions for that increase.
Thomas from the
Hi everyone, I'm Thomas Cravat. I'm the Liberal Democrat candidate in Southampton Test, as you probably can guess. I'm a final year modern history and politics student at the university. The key interests of mine really are environmental issues, much like Alan, but also preventing homelessness and making sure that we have properly funded public services. As your MP, obviously I'll represent all of you, but also as a young person, I do have a duty to represent young people as a quite underrepresented group in Parliament. So for that reason, I imagine my private members bill would be introducing votes at 16. I think 16 and 17-year-olds are largely underrepresented in Parliament in that they can't vote, and that they are perfectly capable and responsible enough to have the vote.
Andrew from Southampton Independents.
Thank you very much, Dan. As Dan said, I'm Andrew Pope, Southampton Independents candidate. We work for you, Southampton Independents. We're proven campaigners, we get things done. We've helped thousands of people in Southampton all year round, not just at election time. I'm 45, I live in Maybush, 2 degrees, worked in industry and in government, both state government in Australia and the government, the Department of Defence in Australia too. I've been a Southampton City Councillor for 6 years. I was the only councillor of all 48 to vote against spending even more millions on the arts complex in the city centre when basic council services like roads, care for the elderly and schools have been cut. I'm the only Southampton Test candidate who campaigned in Southampton for Brexit. I will work for a Brexit that works for everyone. In terms of a private members bill, I think it would be a good idea after the Redbridge Towers and Shirley Towers fires, I would propose a bill making sprinklers compulsory in all high-rise blocks, not just new ones, and carbon monoxide alarms mandatory for all council and social landlords. Thank you.
Keith.
I was born in the Nicholstown district of St Mary's here in Southampton. I've lived in the city all my life. I work as an accountant for a local engineering company. I'm a city councillor I was elected as a Labour councillor back in 2010, after 40 odd years membership of the Labour Party. Found myself on the opposite side to Labour over the question of implementing cuts in local services and jobs. Stood in 2014 as an independent and was re-elected in my ward. So I'm leader of the independent group on the city council, 3 councillors. If I was able to introduce a private members bill, and I move it on the assumption that if you're going to do that sort of thing, you make it worthwhile, I would actually want to move a bill that enshrined something from the Labour Party constitution adopted in 1917, which I think sums up my key political beliefs, and that was to secure for the workers by hand or by brain the full fruits of their industry and the most equitable distribution thereof that may be possible on the basis of the common ownership of the means of production, distribution and exchange.
Okay, the second question is on the topic of terrorism. What should be done to stop people being radicalised by extremist interpretations of Islam and other religious ideologies? What should be done to stop people being radicalised by extremist interpretations of Islam and other religious ideologies? Paul?
Thank you very much. I think it's very simple. What we need to do is continue to make sure that all sections of our community, particularly in this city, are valued. And I think it's very important that everyone in this city feels valued and part of society and part of our city. I think what we need to do very early on is educate from a very early age. We need to make sure that the curriculum is making sure that proper religious education is taught in schools and that a diverse range of education is taught. But we also need to make sure that Ofsted, and we are doing that as a government, have the power to inspect schools to make sure that we have the correct policies in place to see that schools are teaching correctly, and that if there is any sign, as we saw in some areas of the country over the past few years, that we make sure that that is snapped out earlier. But I think the key thing that we need to do is continue to make sure that every young person, wherever they are from or whatever faith they follow, are valued and made sure to be part of our society.
The question of how we ensure that radicalisation does not occur in our communities and that people are not sent off on a path which we've tragically seen in the events of Manchester just recently is indeed about community. It's about the question of making sure that those religious groups, those communities that exist in a diverse way in our country are included as closely as possible in what goes on at community level in our country. And what I don't want to see are circumstances where any religious group or any ethnic minority community becomes isolated within itself, away from the rest of the community in our towns and cities. And that, I think, is the most powerful and important way that we can ensure that through inclusion then that radicalisation can be prevented and diverted. And I might add that the PREVENT programme that's presently underway, I don't think does that to a sufficient extent, not to the extent that it should do, and that further measures need to be undertaken on a community basis to ensure that those programmes can work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. I agree with Alan. The PREVENT strategy, the government strategy, I'm not sure it's worked. It's upset a lot of people because it's kind of making everyone, including professionals, an informant. I think one of the things that we need to do is make sure that we've got the basics right. Some of the security incidents that we've had, because basic security has not been followed. It sounds an obvious thing to say, almost a glib thing to say, but really, sorry, some of the private security firms are no good. And obviously you need to make sure that we leave the EU. That would actually improve our security, but of course if we're going to do so, we need to beef up our own security, but also to cooperate with European friends, but also the rest of the world with our security services.
Turning to terror as a political weapon is invariably a sign of failure and frustration. So I think that in order to ensure that young people in minority communities in our country don't feel obliged to resort to those methods, which are going to be counterproductive, then we have to ensure that they have a voice in our communities and in our political system. So I think it's up to all of us, and particularly those of us on these tables, to reach out to the communities, particularly the young people in them, and demonstrate to them that they have a voice, that we do want them to participate, and that is the best way to achieve the objectives that they themselves want.
I'm effectively going to echo what a lot of the others just said. You just have to make sure that everyone feels welcome in their community, and that when there's someone who feels more like an outsider and feels like they aren't integrated, that they have the support they need, whether that's mental health support or just having a community that they can fall back on.
Let's move on then to a question about education, and there were quite a few questions submitted on this topic. And we'll start with Thomas, actually, from Lib Dems. So locally and nationally, there's a growing awareness that schools face real funding issues and job losses or increased class sizes are inevitable. My children only get one opportunity for a well-rounded education. What would you do to protect education in Southampton?
The Liberal Democrats and myself are opposed to the cuts to school funding. We intend to invest £7 billion into the education system to make sure that all students have the right amount of money going into their education, and that there is equality in education. We're opposed to grammar schools for a similar reason, in that they're kind of dodging the problem. We want to invest in our state schools and give them the money they need, and make sure that everyone has the funding they need for a good education, rather than trying to split people up at age 11 for the sake of it, to try and paper over the problems in our education system.
As someone who's the chair of governors of a school here in Southampton, I'm very aware of the pressures on schools and on head teachers and teaching staff. I do believe that the funding for schools needs to be vastly increased. I do believe that we need to oppose the fragmentation of education that is taking place in terms of academies and now the idea of grammar schools. I do think that we ought to be willing to invest far more money in early years, because if we can prepare our children very early on for the system, they are much better able to cope with that as they get older.
Well, let's be clear, the amount of money lost per pupil in Southampton is nothing short of catastrophic right now. That amounts to about, in Southampton, about £500 per pupil by 2020. Now that means several hundred potentially lost teachers in Southampton, facilities gone, schools much less able to provide the sort of education that's needed, and that just can't go on. It is no excuse to say that, well, there's record amounts of money going into education, because you've actually got to set the money against the pupils, and that's why the measure of money per pupil is absolutely the right one. Now what we need to do, quite simply, is float the education system with sufficient resources so that the class sizes can go down to under 30 where necessary, that education can be provided across the board, and that's certainly what is Labour's intention. Yes, that will cost some money, something like £6 billion in a full year, but it is just essential that we get that funding balance right to give our pupils the education they deserve.
Thank you very much. Well, as someone that failed their 11 plus and is a good old comprehensive school educated boy, of course I want to see funding go into our local schools. And one of the things that I will do as your Member of Parliament is make sure that we continue to get that funding that the Conservative government has put into our schools. And I'll give you some figures. Firstly, we've committed to allocate £4.5 billion worth of extra funding directly into our schools. I believe we need more power for our teachers to teach the curriculum that they want, and I also want an education system that provides choice to parents for the kind of school that they want to send their children to. But what Labour are going around and saying in this city is just fundamentally not true. There is a consultation being issued under the fair funding formula that makes sure that schools are fairly and equally funding across this country. There is a consultation out at the moment, and I have it here, which shows that under our proposed fair funding formula, Southampton schools will receive £1.6 million more of funding through the fair funding formula. Now, Alan, I challenge you to stop telling parents that we are cutting funding in this city when we are actually providing more money. Not.
Okay, and Andrew from the Southampton Independent.
Just let these guys finish first. As we say, Labour or Tory, same old story, blaming each other, bickering. And let's focus on the facts. The uncomfortable truth is that pupil numbers have massively increased since 2004. These are figures that we publish on our website at 8 p.m. tonight on the Southampton Independent's website from Southampton City Council. The number of pupils in Year R in 2007 was 2,194. Last year it was 3,218. That's a massive increase. That's very difficult to keep up with in terms of funding. The Conservatives can get away with saying we're putting more money in and so on, but how can you ever have enough when you've got such a massive increase in 10 years? It's a huge increase. If you don't believe these figures, then please go to our website. As I say, they've been provided by officers of Southampton City Council. So they're the facts. That's the uncomfortable truth. Further uncomfortable truth is that the Labour Council told schools a year ago they was going to give them a certain level of funding, and then told them that they weren't going to get the funding. And we've had the schools lobbying the council, asking for that money back. But so the Tory government, yes, they need to take some of the blame in terms of funding, not keeping up with demand, but demand is massive, and Tory and Labour have both failed on this.
Let's move on to the environment. We'll start with you again, actually, Andrew. How does your party propose to reduce the carbon emissions which causes such high levels of childhood asthma in Southampton? So reducing carbon emissions which causes such high levels of childhood asthma in Southampton.
Okay, well it's a well-known fact, that clinical fact, that the pollution in the city is impacting not just on asthma but also COPD and other respiratory diseases. There's also evidence that it impacts on dementia. In terms of what Southampton Independence is doing, we have campaigned against the Labour Council that has opened lots of new warehouses in Southampton, encouraged more HGVs on our roads, made air quality worse. So they're the basics. So we would say that let's not have so many warehouses in our city. Let's not grant planning permission when local residents don't want so many HGVs and our air quality to be so bad. And Redbridge Ward that I represent on the council is one of the worst in terms of the impact of this and we have met with DP World and with ABP to discuss what they're doing in terms of reducing the emissions, both of their HGVs, but also of the port itself and the other vehicles that operate on the port. So start with the basics first.
Okay, thank you. And Thomas from the Lib Dems.
Air quality is a very big problem in the city, and we've got quite a few ideas of how to deal with it. And it's a lot of little things that add up to make a big difference. So just something as simple as encouraging people to cycle more and encouraging people to adopt electric vehicles makes a big difference. We also committed to phasing out diesel vehicles by 2025, which are polluting the air. And finally, we want to make sure that Britain is carbon neutral by 2050, with 60% of our energy generated by renewables by 2030. And all those kind of little things, although perhaps carbon neutral by 2050 is quite a large change, but all these things will add up to make sure that air quality is increased and that our environment is much healthier.
Keith.
The geography of Southampton makes dealing with vehicles, particularly cars, very difficult. But I think that the biggest contribution that could be made to reducing emissions from vehicles, particularly cars, would be if we were to go back to quite an old idea, which is a municipal bus service, which would be based on need rather than, as at the moment, based on the drive for profit by private bus companies. So that would be the answer, or the biggest contribution that could be made of a council municipal bus service that reduced the number of car journeys in the city.
The issue, I've only got a minute to say this, the issue for the future of the world is about reducing carbon emissions, ideally to an 80% reduction. That is not by 2050. That is not it doesn't have a direct bearing on air quality, which is about NOx emissions and particulate emissions, and those are the things that particularly cause asthma in young children, indeed a deterioration in air quality generally. And there is no way around it as far as those issues of air quality are concerned. We have to change the nature of vehicles that we drive around in the city, and we do business in buses, as Keith has said, and taxis, and indeed the way the port operates in terms of the emissions that come from the ships that come into the port, and indeed the private members bill I mentioned earlier could be a very major contributor to getting those emissions down, particularly when cruise liners come in to the city, which is the equivalent of a town the size of Romsey coming to Southampton, burning diesel generators for 5 days. We've got to deal with that, and we've got to deal with that fast.
These questions are so detailed, answering in a minute is quite difficult, but I'll do my best. I also have met the port, and they are doing. I know air pollution is a huge issue in the city. I won't say I'm everything in relation to a question, but I am asthmatic, and so I do know what people are going through in the city. And the port is doing a bit, but what I think as a Member of Parliament is that we need to push large employers and the port to do more. I think we need to do very simple things, such as rejig the way in which Southampton is designed in terms of road layouts. There are a lot of pinch points in the city. There's a lot of traffic problems in the city, which are encouraging pockets of pollution, and I think that we could do more by taking some traffic lights out and rejigging junctions in that way. I think what we need to do is encourage cars to be people to buy petrol and greener cars now, and incentivise drivers to go back to petrol cars, which many of you, including myself, bought diesel cars after being encouraged to by the last government. But the key thing we need to do is make sure that we work with big employers and really work to try and reduce those emissions and continue to meet our targets nationally and locally.
Okay, let's move to a question on trade. Once Brexit has happened, we'll be free to make changes to laws governing such matters as environmental policies and employment law. Would you be willing to make compromises in either of these areas in order to secure trade deals with non-European countries? How would you make these judgments? And can we start with you, Keith?
I would not be prepared to make any compromises as regards employment practices. I think we have in this country some very laudable employment laws. I think actually they ought to be improved, and I'd look to the trade union movement to be leading the drive for even better employment and health and safety laws. So no, I wouldn't be prepared to compromise on those at all. In terms of trade deals with other countries, I think it's going to be very tough, because we're going to have to renegotiate deals that previously had been negotiated by the European Union, and I'm not sure we've got the resources to really take full advantage of those. And so in that respect, I'm very concerned about the ability of this country to negotiate good, sound trade deals.
Andrew, Southampton.
Thanks very much. No compromises on environmental standards, no compromises on workers' rights. We should lead the world on these things, as we have before. I got into politics from my membership of the RSPB up to the member of the RSPB. It has been 50 years, and I was a union rep. Both these things are very important to me personally, but they're very important for the reputation of our country in the world. I was involved in pushing for an ethical procurement policy at Southampton City Council, and that is still in place, I believe, and I agree with what's in the Labour manifesto in terms of trying to push that out and use government as a way of encouraging better practices both in this country and elsewhere.
Thank you very much. Just to correct something that Andrew said earlier, there are two candidates on this panel that voted and campaigned to leave the European Union, and I was also one of them. I think we'll absolutely no on compromising on workers' rights. We have said as a government that I did. I should know. I went out and did it. We have said that we are going to protect workers' rights, and we have already said that we will continue to meet our environmental targets. And no, I wouldn't compromise on that. But what I see out of the opportunity that we have from leaving the European Union is that we can take these trade deals seriously, and we can go out there and forge trade links with countries out in the wider world without actually compromising on those things. And I think Brexit is a great opportunity for this country and this city.
Thomas.
One of the great things about being in the European Union is the protection that it gives to both workers and also the protection it gives to the environment. There's loads of environmental regulation and workers' rights laws that are enshrined in being part of the European Union. We did vote to leave. What I'd like to see is ideally we'd remain in the single market and stay bound by many of the same rules that operate within the single market in terms of environmental protection and workers' rights. But also, if that's not the case, which I think would be a disaster, but if that's not the case, I'd like to see us incorporate the European environmental protection and workers' rights legislation into British law.
No, a race to the bottom in pursuit of trade always ends in tears. And not only would it mean that we would not, as a result, be able to do trade with those countries that already have those environmental and employment protections in place, because trade is a two-way process, and you have to make sure that the terms of trade are equal both ways. And that's one of the big issues, I think, about Brexit, that actually if we fail to adopt things like the hazardous chemical regulations across the board as far as the UK is concerned, other people will turn back to us and say, well, you're not safe to do trade with anymore because you haven't got the regulations in place that we think are the first part of our trading arrangements. And so that is a bankrupt notion. Now I fear, with the way the Brexit negotiations may go, that people will be tempted to leave aside a number of those environmental protections and employment protections, incorporate them into UK law. And if that is any intention of anybody to do with Brexit negotiations, they really ought to be ashamed of themselves, because that is just not the way forward to trade.
Okay, let's move on to a question about health. The NHS professionals judge the health service to be at crisis level due to chronic underfunding. What is your view of the creeping privatisation in the NHS, and what would you do to help provide more funding for our NHS? And can we start with you, Alan, please?
Well, the record shows us already under the Health and Social Care Act 2013, which is passed in Parliament, is a charter for the privatisation of the National Health Service. And were we to be in government as a Labour Party, we would repeal that act forthwith. Because as far as I'm concerned, the National Health Service absolutely has to stay, firstly, a comprehensive health service for all, and secondly, a health service which is free to all, regardless of the size of their wallets. No ifs, no buts. That's the basis of the National Health Service for the future. And we know at the moment that the National Health Service is being chipped away in terms of its scope, chipped away in terms of the assumptions that people make, not just in health but in care as well, in terms of what is going to be provided free regardless of wallet. And we just have to stop that happening, and that does mean a commitment to fund adequately the National Health Service, and the Labour Party has committed in its manifesto to do that, £30 billion over 5 years to get the National Health Service back where it belongs as a centrepiece of our care and welfare system in the United Kingdom.
I believe the principles enshrined when the health service, the National Health Service, was set up should be restored. The idea that it should be available to all and free at the point of need. I think that it's an indication of how civilised a society is, how it protects the sick and the vulnerable. And I think as a society, we need to grasp the idea that we share the burden of ill health and the need for care in older age amongst us all. To me, that should be a fundamental principle. And the idea of again, fragmenting the health service and privatising a bit here and a bit there should be resisted at all costs. And I'm pleased to see that the health unions are at the forefront of resistance to attacks on the health service. So to me, the fundamental principle of comprehensive availability of health free at the point of care, funded by society as a whole, is paramount.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Well, the NHS always seems to be in crisis, doesn't it? And that's an unfortunate situation, but it's used as a political football by Labour and the Conservatives. It seems to go round and round in circles. I oppose the Health and Social Care Act. I agree with Alan to a certain extent. Recipe for privatisation, maybe. Recipe for fragmentation and confusion, definitely. If you actually look at the structure charts of the NHS before the Health and Social Care Act, it was quite difficult to understand. And then after, well, it's very impossible to understand. And that applies to staff trying to work in the NHS, and they have my every sympathy, because it is a political football and they have endless restructures, but patient care is often an aftersight in those restructures, but it should be obviously priority. As an example, I think where things go wrong in the NHS and Labour sort of reaches for let's add more billions to it, almost like a prescription or a drug really, and the Tories cut it or make things more difficult for it, doesn't really get us anywhere. But we exposed Southern Health NHS Foundation Trust, the Mental Health Trust. We got the cameras into their meetings when they did want the public to scrutinise them. Hundreds of deaths at Southern Health. It's an absolute scandal, and we helped to expose it. That's what you need to do with the NHS. You need to expose it and fix it, not keep adding money.
I would quite disagree with that in a lot of ways. I think the NHS is chronically underfunded. There's a £2 billion deficit this year alone. The number one thing it needs at the moment is more money. The Liberal Democrats have proposed an additional £6 billion per year in the next Parliament, so the same as the Labour figure actually of 30 billion. This will be funded by a penny in the pound increase in income tax. So, it's our health service, we all have to chip in and pay for it. Additionally, we want to reintroduce the nurses' bursaries that went to nursing and midwifery students. I think applications down about 23% since they were cut, and that is 23% less nurses and less midwives in the NHS at a time where we've never needed them more.
I'll try and do this in a minute. We have already protected the National Health Service in terms of a ring-fenced amount of money that the NHS itself asked for over the last 5 years, and we have committed to fund at least another 8 billion over the term of the next Parliament. And can I firstly say that no one on this panel disagrees with the point of an NHS free at the point of use. It has saved members of my family and has helped me in the past, and any accusation that I or any member of the Tory party do not want an NHS free at the point of use is nonsensical. But what we have to look at also, and I will as your Member of Parliament, ensure that I fight every day if I'm elected on June the 8th for increased funding in Southampton General and the other hospitals in this constituency. I will do that from day one so that everybody in this constituency has the best health services available to everybody. But I believe in the NHS at the free point of use. The Conservatives have committed to invest billions of pounds more into the NHS, and any attempt to say that we haven't is just not true.
Okay, we're going to hear a question from a first-time voter, someone who actually turns 18 on election day. What an exciting day for her. And her question is this, and we'll start with you, Paul. I wasn't allowed to have my say in previous elections and the referendum, and Brexit will undoubtedly have a big impact on my life. What are you going to do for people like me, whose future is uncertain because we weren't allowed to give our opinion, purely because we were only a few months too young and are facing drastic changes to our country because of it?
Good question. Are they in the audience? Where are they? No? Okay. Well, I'll give the answer anyway. Firstly, I actually, it shows my independence, but I would vote in favour of votes for 16-year-olds, and that is something that I would support, because I do think that young people in this country at 16 are capable of making decisions in this country and in the elections, and that's something that I would vote for in Parliament. I remember when I was 16, I was a bit of a sad student because I was involved in politics and working every day trying to, in elections and stuff, and I think it's great, it was me. But I do think that young people deserve that voice. And what I would do as a Member of Parliament, as I did when I worked at the council, was going into schools, making sure that people and young people I listen to every day, and that their views are taken into account by me, so that I can directly take those back to ministers and make their lives better in this city. I just said it goes against my independence. I will vote. You said it's not Tory policy, it's not, but I will vote for it.
Thank you.
Well, Paul has just announced his first disciplining by the whips in his own party. If he is elected on June the 8th, because certainly that is not Conservative policy, and indeed they fought against votes at 16 over a period of time, particularly during the last referendum, when there should have been votes at 16 in that referendum because of the future effect of the referendum process. So yes, not only will I be voting for votes at 16, but I will be voting for votes at 16 because it says so in our manifesto that we are in favour of votes at 16, and that's therefore I wouldn't actually be hauled up by the whips because they would be applauding me through the lobbies instead.
Okay, Tom, slip that.
I remember being very frustrated back in 2010 actually, when I couldn't vote in the general election. I was 14 at the time. I'm not proposing we take it that far, but I think votes for 16 and 17-year-olds is a good first step in enfranchising more of the population. Specifically in terms of Brexit, it's Lib Dem party policy, or both for vote at 16, but also to have a referendum on the terms of the Brexit deal. That will mean that people who didn't get to vote last time, 16, 17-year-olds being a prime example, will have another say on a very specific deal. Additionally, I would probably enfranchise EU nationals in that as well.
I'd favour a reduction in the age of voting. But what disappoints me is that so many 18-year-olds don't seem to feel it's worth voting. The issue of declining turnout at elections, particularly general elections, is something that I think we need to take very seriously. To me, the answer isn't just to reduce the age at which young people can vote, but to try and come up with the answer. Why is it that so many young people don't vote at all? And I can only assume that they just don't feel that their vote will make a difference. And it's not just young people who feel that, it's people of all age groups who feel that their vote no longer counts for much. And so I'm actually rather pleased that at this general election there is a very clear, it does appear to be a very clear choice. And so for that reason, perhaps turnout will go up this time. But I don't think the answer is just a mechanical reduction in the voting age. It's about motivating people to vote in the first place.
Thank you. Well, I was smiling as listening to other responses. I agree with a lot of what Keith was saying in terms of voting, but there's a lot of other stuff that you can get involved in. We, Southampton Independents, we encourage people of all ages to get involved in the local communities. In fact, a lot of the local voluntary people support us, and it's about being an active citizen, and this has been a quandary for 2,000 or 3,000 years, probably a lot longer than that, and going back to Athenian style democracy, which wasn't democracy that often is talked about, because if you were a slave or a foreigner, you weren't allowed to participate. But the idea of being an active citizen is something that we try to encourage. It's something that we try to practice, and we prefer, and I hope that's come across in my other answers, we prefer doing than talking.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to a question on housing. Austerity cuts have contributed to the low level of building of social and affordable housing, so now there's an extreme shortage of suitable homes. Increasing rents and house prices are putting living accommodation out of the reach of many. What would you do to help ensure enough new social homes are built and rents are at a reasonable level in our city? And Thomas, can we start with you, please?
There's a large housing shortage, and particularly, as mentioned, affordable housing shortage. The Liberal Democrats plan to build an additional 300,000 houses per year by 2021, I believe. This will do a lot to reduce or increase the housing supply and make sure that everyone is able to access a house at a good price. Additionally, we would reintroduce housing benefit for 18 to 21-year-olds who were recently excluded from it by the Conservatives. The shortage of housing and the unavailability of housing benefit are also contributing to homelessness in this country. So it's very important that we get housing sorted to reduce homelessness and also make sure everyone has a home to live in.
Thanks. Well, housing, yes. I represent Redbridge Ward, Millbrook, Redbridge and Maybush on City Council. Well, there's been utter failure of Southampton City Council to build council homes. It's about 27 in 5 years. What a failure. Millbrook and Maybush regeneration has delivered nothing. We campaigned against that because residents didn't like the plans that the Labour Council came forward with. This idea of affordable homes, it can mean anything, and it's used to confuse people. I think we need to have state housing. We need to have a mixed housing sector that's working. Maybe we should be considering the city having licensing for all landlords, and I say that as a landlord myself. Unfortunately, there's a minority of landlords that let the rest of us down, and you see that in some parts of the city, unfortunately. But a mixed housing sector, private and public, hopefully with some cooperative housing in the mix. But again, the Labour Council, despite being affiliated to the Cooperative Party, hasn't delivered cooperative housing in the city. So City Council's got a lot to answer for. Lastly, it gave back £1 million of right to buy receipts to the government because it failed to spend it. So the ineptitude is spectacular by Labour Council.
Well, I think Andrew is actually being slightly harsh on the Labour Council. They've pledged to build a council house for every day that they've been in office. They've been in office for 6 years and they've built 87 council homes in that time. So actually,
I must have missed it.
Being slightly harsh, but they are doing a dire job. What we have said as a national government is that we will commit to 400,000 new homes per year, affordable homes. But we have actually, as a national government, since the 7 years that we've been in power, built more council homes than the entirety of the last Labour government. And this government has also, as somebody that, I hate to say as somebody and keep comparing myself, but I think I'm a normal guy, I can't afford a mortgage and I'm renting in the private sector. And two of the schemes that we've brought in for young people and low and medium income people is the Help to Buy scheme and shared ownership that are providing people with the opportunity for the first time to own a house. And the number of homeowners in this city who are not paying as much for a full mortgage and getting a shared ownership scheme are going up, as I showed the local government secretary 3 weeks ago. But the very last thing is that we need to continue to empower housing associations to have that power to continue to build the mixed tenure housing that we've seen in Southampton and across the country.
Well, it is simply not true that locally affordable housing and housing in general have not been built in the city. Over 1,000 new homes have been built in the last 4 years in Southampton, and a good proportion of those are affordable. So there are some made-up figures going on here. And that is on the record. Those are actual houses built. You can see them. They've got roofs on, people living in them. Now the issue on affordable housing in particular is simply we've got to build more houses, and Labour has pledged that it's really going to get those figures up. Affordable housing starts at the lowest since the early 2020s across the country, so there are those houses just not being built, and we need to get building those. That is be a combination of council housing, houses for rent, and affordable homes as part of planning arrangements, and we're suggesting 1 million homes over the period of the next government. But I also think we need to look very carefully at the quality of homes we already have in terms of their livability, energy efficiency and so on, and Labour also wants to insulate and bring up to energy efficiency standards 4 million homes over the next period, because that is just as
offered advice by everybody on what I should say. I must say, I don't buy into Tory promises of building hundreds of thousands of homes when they've spectacularly failed over the last few years to actually tackle the housing crisis in this country. And I don't buy into the idea that this Labour Council has built thousands.
No. Over 1,000.
Just 1,000 homes. Not true. Not true. But what we do have in this city is a spectacular failure of political will to take the bull by the horns and build affordable council homes. In my own ward of Coxford, we have a site that has stood empty, the site of the old Oaklands Community School. It's sat there behind hoardings, waiting to be developed for years. And yet the council can't seem to get its act together and build homes for local people on it at affordable prices. So what's lacking is political will in this city. And if I was MP, I would put so much pressure on this city council to build. The universities can do it. They don't have a problem with accommodating their students in new buildings. The city council should have the same determination.
A question on international aid. And we'll start with you, Andrew, in a moment. Are you in favour of keeping to the current policy of giving 0.7% of our national income as international aid, and why?
My personal view as a student at Southampton University, Masters in International Relations, that is yes. But speaking to people on the doorsteps and in the streets, the answer, unfortunately, for the majority of people, is no. It's a complex thing, international aid, and it can prevent refugees, can prevent terrorism, it can prevent war. Unfortunately, people, they've got this thing in their head saying, well, charity begins at home. So the question is, if we've got the Labour manifesto that's got all these spending pledges in it, where's the money coming from? It's got to be said. It's not clear. And Alan, sorry, but you can wave all the documents you like, but people don't trust Labour with the economy. People don't trust Labour with the economy. So it's in terms of international aid, people think, well, you know what, we're probably better off funding compensation for women that lost their pensions.
Okay, and Paul.
This is a really easy one for me because it was under a Conservative government that we were the first international country to commit to the 0.7% budget, and we have pledged to stick to it. And actually, what I think most people in this city want, as I've been knocking on the doors, is not for an end to international aid, but just a commitment from our politicians and their local member of parliament that the country is spending it wisely and efficiently, and it is going to those most in genuine need. I'm not sure, and it is my government, I'm not sure that currently is happening in the best way possible. I think we have much more work to do to make sure that those genuine countries and communities abroad get that support, but absolutely 110% yes, I stand by the 0.7% pledge.
Keith, please.
Yes, we should maintain spending on overseas aid. We're the 5th richest country in the world. If we can't afford to help countries in need, then who can? So, it would be to our eternal shame if we didn't.
Okay, thank you. And Thomas, Liberals?
The Liberal Democrats and myself, as you may imagine, are completely committed to the 0.10% of GDP spending on international aid. I have to disagree with Andrew a bit there in that he said people on the doorstep don't want it. Even if people on the doorstep don't want it, it's clearly the right thing to do. It's essential for dealing with extreme poverty worldwide, and it is the right thing we need to do. So we need to commit to doing that. We do have to be careful about where it goes and making sure that it goes to the people who actually need it and isn't lost in bureaucracy or lost to corruption, but it is a fundamental thing that we must continue.
Thank you. And Al?
Well, I think with one exception, there's a remarkable outbreak of unanimity here this evening. I'm of course committed that we keep our 0.7% GDP going into international aid, and indeed I absolutely agree with Paul that it has been a commitment of this last Conservative, or at least the coalition government. David Cameron was particularly keen to keep that pledge going. So I don't think it's one that we need to disagree about. But where I think we might tease this apart just a little bit is where that aid goes, how it is used, and what it is associated with. And it should not, for example, be predicated on trade. So trade aid deals are poison and should not be pursued. It should be also predicated on an ethical foreign policy of the country that is providing that aid. And I want to make sure, in terms of making that aid go as far as possible, that it goes to the right recipients and is used in the best way, and that includes transparency, and democracy in the process.
A question about mental health, and Keith, we'll start with you in a moment. The number of antidepressant prescriptions has almost doubled over the last 10 years. The prevalence of other mental illnesses are increasing too, causing much pain to them and those around them. What must be done in the short term to support those with mental health problems? And what should be done in the long term to reverse the current increase in mental health problems?
Well, the obvious answer is that there does need to be more funding for that aspect of healthcare. In terms of the increase in reliance on antidepressants, obviously that's an indication of the pressures of the kind of society we live in. And there's no easy answer to that. But nevertheless, we need to ensure that there is support, and that can only come about by increased funding. The issue of healthcare, of mental health care, is obviously one that's coming very much to public attention in recent times, and I think it needs us as politicians across all parties to be prepared to recognise that this is an issue that we've all got to address.
I'm not sure if mental health prevalence is increasing or if recognition of mental health issues as legitimate health issues is simply emerging. Support for mental health problems over the last few years has increased massively. The campaigns against mental health stigma have been introduced, and there's been a lot of campaigning to recognise that mental health is just as important as physical health, and that's where our policy centres around. In the coalition, we introduced maximum waiting times for people to receive mental health treatment. Unfortunately, this is being chipped away at by the Conservatives. So what we need to see to combat that is more funding for the health service and mental health service in particular, and a move down on waiting times to make sure that anyone who wants mental health treatment can get it quickly and locally. Additionally, we want to make sure that people who have mental health crises aren't put in prison cells during that, and they actually have the support they need rather than being locked in a cell overnight.
Well, the state of mental health provision through the NHS is not a pretty sight, I have to say, at the moment. We've lost over 6,000 mental health nurses over the last few years, and funding is certainly in the NHS not going in the direction of what you might hope to be an equality of respect and funding both for physical health and mental health. And that is particularly acute as far as young people's mental health is concerned, because we know that over 50% of mental health episodes are apparent in young people by the age they are 14, and yet only 8% of funding of the mental health budget from NHS actually goes into young people's mental health. That has got to change, and that's not just a question of funding, however, it's a question of actually getting understanding of those circumstances into schools, into workplaces for young people, so that actually young people, when they do experience onset of mental health symptoms, can get the support they need at the earliest age possible, and that, I believe, then starts to flow right through the mental health process in adult life.
Dan, I'd like to answer this in two parts, if I may, because this is a real issue that is coming through into the mainstream, thankfully being raised a lot more. So firstly, I'm really pleased that our government was a government that made parity of care between between other illnesses and mental health, and now have a parity of recognition within the NHS, and we need to do more to make sure that that is continue to be assessed and addressed. But we've also committed, the Prime Minister made an announcement 2 weeks to 10,000 more extra direct frontline mental health workers and 1.4 billion extra injected into mental health provision. But I think us on stage also have to, I think I want to answer again, when I used to run children's social services, one of the problems with the system at the moment is that children, when a young person who has mental health issues gets to the age at which children's services stop, they fall off the system and we miss them. And what we need to do locally and nationally is make sure that those social services between adults and children are connected better and integrated better so that we keep them on the system and give them the best care needed. But I think we also need to, I'm trying to get into a minute, but what we also need to do as politicians is openly and fully support, raise awareness and remove the stigma which still exists amongst some elements in our communities that you are okay and you are allowed to have these issues and we will work with you to make sure that they're sorted out, and that's what I would do locally.
I mentioned earlier on the case locally of Southern Health NHS Foundation Trust, Mental Health Trust. What's happened there is tragic. I became aware of that probably about 18 months ago in the case of Connor Sparrowhawk, a young man who died in a bath under their care. Initially they claimed that it was natural causes, but he was epileptic. He died of an epileptic fit in the bath. That was just the first case, and there were hundreds more. Southern Health NHS Foundation Trust has been a catalogue of problems, has had a catalogue of problems. Only now our prosecution is proceeding. As I mentioned earlier on, early last year, we pushed for the cameras to be let into the board meetings at Southern Health. They didn't want us in there, so we got the BBC and the ITV in there. But it's a question of competence within these trusts, and frankly, the board was incompetent and they've now all gone. We campaigned for them to go. So there's a question of attitude, but it's also a question of competence. Labour and Conservative councils have failed to safeguard children, so I'm glad that you mentioned that, Paul, because under your watch there were serious case reviews. Labour and Conservative sought to cover up rather than clean up.
The next question I've got is the last one that I've got as a pre-prepared question. So in a few minutes we'll go to a roving mic, if that's possible. Some guys at the back. And can I ask that as you consider a question that you want to ask this evening, can you make sure it's addressed to all the candidates, not just one candidate in particular, please? So the final question that I've got down here is to do with the ageing population. As people are living longer, the cost of health and pensions and the need for social care increases. What rights and responsibilities should older people have in our society? So what rights and responsibilities should older people have in our society? And can we start with you, Alan, please? Yep.
Well, indeed, we have what some people, or many people, have characterised as a particularly a looming care crisis over the next years as our population gets older collectively, and the requirements, and particularly, I hope, requirements of enabling older people to live independently in the society get quite considerably larger. And so my first starting point in terms of rights and responsibilities is, it seems to me, it is an absolute responsibility of all of us to enable older people to live in dignity and in their own homes, wherever possible, and have the support they need. Now, I've been frankly horrified by the debate that has taken place during the general election about ideas such as paying for domiciliary care in your own home by selling your own home. And that seems to be a completely wrong way to go about the process. It needs to be something that we have, it should be a socialised cost, it is something we should all contribute to, and is something that we need to make sure is properly supported for the future. And those sort of solutions should have no place in a dignified later life for people in our society.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I suspected this question might have come up as it's been coming up on the doorsteps over the last few weeks. And of course, we need dignity and dignity for our older people in our society and in our communities. They have performed a great service by paying into a system and contributing to society for a very long time, and we absolutely need to make sure that they have dignity. But what Alan said is just fundamentally not true. The current system means that if anyone is earning over £23,000, all of their estates can be used under current social care funding, and no estate could be left. Now, what we are doing, and I understand that it's a worry to many people, but the new system that we want to put in place is fairer. It means that at least £100,000 of an estate will be left, so that you can leave those to your family.
Domiciliary care.
No, hang on, I'll let you have your say, Alan. But you said that people will have to sell their houses under this proposal. That is not true. Under this system, no one will have to sell their house while they're paying for their care. It will be taken into account in the overall cost once they have finished paying into the system. So what we are seeing is a higher cap on which people are going to have to pay a certain amount for care. They will not have to sell their house. And I think it's right, when we have 2 million more over 75s, that unfortunately some people are going to have to pay for their care in elderly age.
Okay, can we hear from Thomas for Lib Dems?
The primary thing we need to provide for all the people who need social care is dignity. They need to be able to live out their lives in their own home or in a care home if desired, with the support they require from care services. And what that means is that we need to increase funding for social care and try to increasingly integrate it into the NHS, so that you don't get situations where elderly people who require care are stuck in hospitals waiting for the care they need when they're outside of hospitals. The Conservative plans for the dementia tax, as it's called, are interesting because it seems almost like a backdoor way of introducing a higher inheritance tax threshold. If you want to tax inheritance, do it directly through an inheritance tax. Instead, what they've achieved is taxing sick old people, which I think we can all agree is bad.
Thank you. Andrew for Southampton Independence.
Thanks very much. Rights, well, it's obvious really. People who are old need to be looked after, and they have the right to be looked after, in the correct way. It's an obvious thing to say, but neither Labour or the Conservatives have dealt with this. They've dodged the issue. Social care and the NHS, again, Labour and the Conservatives have said, well, they should work together. Well, they're not, are they? Because in this city, the Tory council, which Paul was part of, closed care centres. I campaigned against those. The Labour council closed care centres as well. Brownhill House. That's right, isn't it, Keith? In my ward. So that's why we say Labour or Tory. Same old story. NHS and care is in crisis. And unfortunately, the real policy that needs to be implemented was in the report on the Commission and funding of care and support, and that is to pull the risk in an insurance-based model. Unfortunately, neither Labour or Tory have implemented that policy, and Theresa May's performance recently, last Monday, just shows what a mess the Tories are in on this, but so is Labour too.
Thank you. Keith.
I find it quite distressing that there seems to have opened up a debate on the concept of when people reach a point in their lives where they need support and they need help and they are suffering, that they should be suddenly required to not only go through that trauma but pay for it themselves. I find that a grossly offensive idea. Looking after our elderly should be, as Alan said, a social cost. It should be financed from general taxation, progressive taxation, and it should be the safety net that sits beneath all of us so that we can go through our lives competent in the expectation that when we get to that age, when we need care, society will provide it. So I find it offensive that people dare suggest that those who need the most help should then also have to pay for it from their own pockets.
Anyone here with a question from the floor? Yeah, I think the first hand up was over there, so we'll just bring a microphone around to you.
Hello, our roads and our pavements in this country and this city are an absolute disgrace. What, if anything, are there going to be any provisions to amend this, to pay for the restructuring of our roads? This city is a disgrace. There are potholes, there are pavements up, you can't see round corners. I myself have fallen over twice in this city because there are terrible potholes, and I think they all ought to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Keith, could we start with you, please?
Potholes. Yeah, our city is plagued with potholes and poor, deteriorating roads and pavements. I think all of us who are involved in local government know that we spend less each year in Southampton on repairing potholes than the cost each year of new potholes and dilapidating pavements. So in other words, the problem can only get worse because we're never spending enough in a year to catch up with the developing crisis. I think it alongside education and health and security, it may appear to be a quite insignificant issue, but in actual fact, no, it's important. It's the thing that I probably get most complaints of in my postbag as a local councillor. It matters to people, and I think it's the responsibility of the local authority to deal with that. We need tens of millions of pounds spent in Southampton on our roads and on our footpaths. We ought to be able to capitalise the cost of repairing them, which actually means challenging the government in the way it requires us to fund repairs. But we ought to be prepared to bite on the bullet, borrow the money, spread the cost over years and deal with the issue.
The roads and pavements are very poor in Southampton, as we all know. I've certainly had some close calls on my bike cycling down the avenue and nearly getting the front wheel in and flipping over. But it's a kind of twofold problem. It's definitely the number one complaint I get on the doorstep. It's a twofold problem. One, the council needs to a degree take it more seriously and put more money into the roads, but that is prevented by government funding to local government having been cut quite dramatically over the last few years. So, although the council does need to prioritise it more, their hands are slightly tied by the lack of central funding to local government.
Well, the precise issue in terms of potholes in Southampton is that there is a company that contracts to mend potholes and many other things in Southampton called Balfour Beatty, which is on a contract from the City Council to do those repairs. I won't say who entered into the contract in the first place, but it is a contract that can't easily be broken. They, among other things, have a limit on the definition in that contract of the size of the potholes that they actually repair and what they define as a pothole and what is not a pothole. And that seems to me to be a recipe for not getting potholes repaired. And so one thing that we do need to do, although I don't think this is easily possible, is actually, as far as the city is concerned, is get that contract back into direct control of the City Council so that it can actually do the work that's needed. Now, that indeed, however, doesn't overall solve the problem, because Thomas is absolutely right that, of course, this is a national issue to the extent of not enough money for road repairs coming into local government generally. And I agree with Keith on this one, that actually making that an infrastructural issue, whereby you change the whole basis.
Alan is correct. It was my administration, or the administration that I was part of, that contracted for Balfour Beatty to take over the roads, which repaired. I am proud of that, because actually the rate of repairs in this city under that Conservative administration vastly increased than when they were controlled by Alan's party. And what you are absolutely correct, that this city's roads are very bad. My car suffered from it. And what I think we need to do is have a Member of Parliament that actually lobbies the local council to invest extra money into our roads, because I haven't heard our Member of Parliament do that in the time that I've been in this city, and in me you will get someone that will lobby the local council to do that. I think we need, and what I would also encourage the local Labour Council to do is spend some of the £61 million worth of reserves that they have to fund our roads, which they are not doing because they claim it's central government cuts, when they have some money to make extra repairs in this city.
Yeah, well, on the leaflet that you would have received from us, one of the first things that's mentioned, and it is a very important issue to people, roads over Southampton, we say, are a disgrace. That's what people tell us all the time. And sorry, Alan, but you've stayed silent. You tried to claim that the Labour Council have done a good job on roads, but nobody agrees with you, I'm afraid, in the city. And I think I've heard one person who's an HGV driver thinks the roads in the city are better than in other parts of the country, but thousands more think that they are a disgrace. And it's about the wrong priorities. Labour and Conservative administrations have not prioritised spending on the roads. Instead, they've spent money on pet projects like the Arts Complex and the Sea City Museum. £16 million taxpayers' money, then Keith mentioned about tens of millions of pounds, spent on the Arts Complex. I'm the only councillor, 48, that said no to extending even more millions going on the Arts Complex. So we can talk about Tory government cuts, we can talk about to a long in the teeth, but it's the wrong priorities. And before the Arts Complex, it was the Sea City Museum, another pet project which is a disaster. Yes, we can talk about the capital contract, we can talk about government cuts, but if the council has the wrong priorities and makes the wrong decisions, the roads will continue to be a disgrace.
Time is almost up, I'm afraid, so I'm going to ask for some final statements from the different candidates. I knew we wouldn't have time to answer everyone's questions, sorry about that, but we do want to make sure we get home before midnight. So, can I ask the candidates just to sum up? No, I think for the sake of the team here and others who have banked on this being a 9:30 finish, we need to honour that as closely as possible as we can. So the candidates here, could you sum up why we should vote for you and for your party? And can we start with Andrew, please?
Thanks very much. Well, as I said at the beginning of the evening, we're about the community, we're about the people of Southampton, we're about working with them to improve their lives. Some people, sort of seem to laugh at the issue of roads and potholes earlier on, but this is the most important thing to local people. The second thing is bins. Labour councillors voted through fortnightly bins. So why is that? Well, there you go. We hold Labour and Conservative to account, and that's why you should vote Southampton Independence. We are independent, we listen to you, we work for you, we stand up for you locally and nationally, and if you elect me as your MP, I will be a very loud voice in Westminster and here.
Come to you, please.
Well, thank you very much. As I outlined earlier, I am somebody that cares passionately about this city and who wants this city to progress and improve. And this election is about a clear choice, the most important choice that we've faced in a generation. Nationally, we need a strong government to make sure we get the best deal for this city and for this country out of Brexit. And the alternative is an unstable government led by Jeremy Corbyn, who even Alan Whitehead doesn't believe should be leader of the Labour Party. But locally, I will be a strong voice for this constituency. Regardless of the Conservatives, if we win the election, being in government, you will have a strong voice every day, whether it's the right or wrong thing, in standing up for this city and getting the best services and investment that this city needs. That is my pledge to you this evening, and that is why I'm asking for your vote on June the 8th. Thank you very much.
As a city councillor, I have a proven track record being prepared to take on the ruling party this city council. And I would, as the MP representing the city, carry through that kind of determination and willingness to take on issues in the interests of the city. I would be an MP who worked within the city, within the communities, as I have done as a city councillor, and I think I could be the best person to do that job.
Well, I would like to think that if you want a strong voice at Southampton, you already have a strong voice at Southampton. And I've tried in my entire life as a Member of Parliament to do just that. And I think, with very few exceptions, it will be agreed that is what I have consistently tried to do in Parliament over the years. But I don't just want to be a strong voice for Southampton with no bearings whatsoever. I want to be a strong Labour voice for Southampton, because I believe that the values and the proposals that are there as far as the Labour manifesto is concerned are actually the right prescriptions for Southampton in so many different ways. And so I would want to look forward to be able to, yes, be a strong voice for our city, but also make sure that as far as our representation in Parliament is concerned, its representation is based on Labour values, Labour ideas, and Labour prescriptions for the future, which come back to Southampton positively in so many ways for the future.
As your MP and as a Liberal Democrat, I will ensure that the NHS, our education services, mental health, environmental protection, all of these services are well funded and fit for purpose. We need to make sure they're working properly and are protecting the people in society that need them most, particularly for the NHS in that case, but also that they are serving us through education and making sure that young people in this country have the opportunities they need. We need to keep a strong deal with Europe. We need to stay at the centre of Europe, and we need to ensure trade with Europe, particularly as a port city that relies so highly on our trade with other countries. We need to ensure that we remain in the single market. The Liberal Democrats are committed to, at minimum, staying in the single market and customs union, while also guaranteeing the rights of EU nationals already living here. It's the right thing to do, and it's right for the economy. As your MP, I will work for Southampton to ensure that we're both economically successful and compassionate to the citizens of the city and the country.
Lovely. Let me just wrap up and say on behalf of all of us, we're very grateful to all five of you for standing. We know that standing for election is not an easy task, and if you're elected, then being an MP is not an easy task either. I think I want to say on behalf of all of us, and I'd love all of us to express our appreciation for all of the candidates for their willingness to stand and represent not just themselves, but us and our city in Parliament. Thank you very much. Thank you again to the Methodist Church for hosting us. Very grateful to the team here for doing that. And I know not everyone is a Christian here, but this event is being hosted by churches together in Shirley. And so I'd like just to pray a brief prayer just as we conclude. If you're not a Christian, don't feel you have to say amen. Just close your eyes and think happy thoughts and work out who you're going to vote for if you don't know already. So let me just close in prayer for us. Loving Heavenly Father, thank you for caring about how our country is run, and that we have the right to vote for our politicians and government. And we pray for our candidates and their families, and all involved in campaigning, for health and stamina, for safety and truthfulness, for integrity and graciousness. Give us wisdom in how we use our vote, especially when no one candidate ticks all our boxes. And give us humility in how we use our vote, that we would love our neighbour as ourselves. We pray for a government government and parliament which will build the best possible relations with other nations and help bring unity and peace as our nation becomes increasingly diverse. And we ask these things because you call us to act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with you, our gods. Amen. Amen. Thank you all very much for coming.